So today on Sonny Talk Spurs, I'm joined by an amazing guest. You could say he's the king of stats on YouTube. It's James Allcott. How are you doing, James?
I'm all right. You're not expecting stats now then, are you? I thought we were just going to have a chat. You've done me right up there, Sonny. You killed me. But no, thank you very much. I do use a lot of stats. I don't remember or retain many of them, but I do use a lot of them. So yeah, thank you, mate.
Well, I'm just hoping you know, when we're having a conversation here about Tottenham and Harry Kane, you'll chuck a few nuggets in there and the viewers will be like, like a fireworks display.
Okay, well, I mean, for retention alone, I'll go, absolutely, that's going to happen. But let's find out. Let's have a chat.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to start, obviously, because I've noticed from watching your videos, you've been a big admirer of Spurs and especially under Ange Postecoglou this season. So I want to sort of ask, how have you found it watching it, especially as a neutral?
Yeah, I think, exactly, as a neutral, I think each season, teams, you sort of you start to have a bit of an alliance with certain teams based on quite a pure reason of enjoying the people that are playing there or the idea of which they're playing. And so weirdly, I got some comments, people saying, James is a closet Tottenham fan. Well, last year I was a closet Arsenal fan because I quite enjoyed Arsenal last year because I liked the story. It was a young team. They were playing good football. It was an exciting story. And I think there's no way that you can escape that that's what's happening this year with Tottenham, because I think everyone thought it could have been really ugly. No one knew that it was going to be as impressive, as free-flowing, as positive as it has been. So I don't think you can get away from that. I don't think you can get away from how enjoyable Postecoglou is. And it's almost interesting how that is a refreshing way of being as a manager and why there's so few people that behave the way that he behaves. I think when you pair it up with getting results and playing good football, then what's not to like? So yeah, I think everyone's loved watching Tottenham this year. And I think, I do a podcast with Flav, who's obviously a big Tottenham fan, and his mood is incredibly different. I imagine your mood's pretty different.
We are, yeah. Mate. It's so good. The vibe is back.
Yeah, the vibe is back. And I think that's that sort of opportunity to sort of hope is something that's really exciting. And look, I know a lot of people don't like Tottenham fans sometimes. I've got no problem with Tottenham fans, and I'd really like to see them win the trophy that's kind of shuts everyone up, just to kind of know what it's like on the other side, because I think Tottenham are actually, of that sort of big six that we've spoken about for so long, they're the underdogs within that group. And so there's a lot, I feel attuned to the underdogs. So there's a lot to like there. And that's why, I think we've done videos on them, and I think people are enjoying those videos as well, because I think there's lots to learn from the way that he's playing as well, right? It's something that feels kind of obvious, but I think it's so freeing that people are just loving watching it, right?
Yeah, and I'd say a main thing about that love is, as you say, Ange Postecoglou and what he's brought to the side. We always know that at his previous clubs it's always started a bit slowly, but at Spurs it's sort of hit the ground running. Even against the pre-season game against West Ham, we were showing different sort of passages of play. The passing was better, the press was more intense. So it's really good to see. And now moving on to Ange himself and his style, how do you reckon it sort of stacks up with modern football? And a lot of people will compare Pep and Klopp and Arteta, because at the moment they're the pinnacles of attacking football. Where do you think Ange's style at least sort of fits into this modern football world?
Right. So I think it feels like to a point there's an attitude there that's applied within this. So that's the sort of Klopp side of it, I think. But then I think in terms of wanting to sort of own the ball and have possession, I think that would obviously be the Pep side of it. I think what he's done so brilliantly is to integrate a system so quickly. But I think it's something that we kind of all have a look at it and it all makes complete sense to us. It's just free-flowing football, essentially. But to get people sort of buying in that quickly, I think is obviously incredibly impressive. I think that's interesting you picked those two people, because obviously there's been a few comparisons with Pep. But actually, I feel it feels more Liverpool-y. It feels more Klopp first couple of years in terms of the feeling. And I think that will reveal itself when you play Arsenal in a few weeks, which I think is going to be so exciting to watch. Because I think if you beat them or you beat a Liverpool, I think then people will really sort of sit up and take notice. That said, I think there's probably going to be games where it doesn't totally click and you'll draw games that you should probably go and win. And that feels a bit like Klopp when he had that first full season where it was a team that was exciting and could beat anyone, but could also kind of let themselves down, hadn't refined or improved enough in terms of personnel to be top 3, top 1, basically, obviously, in a league format. But I think that when I come back to the attitude thing, it's about being fearless, being on the front foot, and say, for example, that goal from Sarr against Man United, that's literally down to having bodies in the box. And so that comes back to the attitude more than anything else. It's like, go and, let's flood the box. Let's get bodies in the box. Let's have a couple of guys who are quick enough at the back to give ourselves a chance. And we'll probably score more goals than we'll concede. And so, again, it's good fun. But I think today, and I saw Postecoglou talking on TalkSport, and he was saying how it's up to the players these days. They have to kind of have the dressing room to themselves, really. And so I think that's what he's doing as well. I did a podcast yesterday talking about Ancelotti, the AC Milan side of the sort of noughties, and how he's kind of recreating it. We're making a video on the channel about that with Real Madrid. And what we were sort of talking about there is the sort of cycles of football and how drilled it is now, football, that Ancelotti is so enjoyable to root for, because what he's doing is he's allowing good players to have their own mind and go and solve and figure out problems. And I think if you're a team that has one set way of playing, or even like 3 set ways and patterns of play, that's great. But if you've got players that are just interacting with each other and understanding each other's kind of flow, understanding the movement of the pitch, and the space within the pitch as well, then you have several answers instead of those 5 that are drilled down, and also those 5 that can be spotted by the opposition. And I think that, again, provides more answers for a team. And I think that's what football's about a lot of the time. And that's why someone like James Maddison has come into this team and is loving life, because he is a player that wants to have that freedom to go wherever he wants to. Bit like a Bellingham, right? And if you allow those, I think football's got so labelled that, weirdly, because things go around in cycles, people go, oh, okay, well, everyone seems to be stuck in their position here. Why don't we have someone who can go wherever they want? And then all of a sudden, that's going to create new overloads and confuse the opposition a little bit. So to answer your question, I think he's kind of bang in the middle. And I think there's a little, if you've got those 2 managers, there's a bit of Ancelotti, I think, pulling him in another direction as well, because there is an element of freedom there as well, which I think's, again, really enjoyable to watch.
I like that comparison. That was like poetry. Listening to that, that was like a bedtime story. On
no
TV
stats
movies.
though. No stats though. Sorry.
We don't need stats.
Stats are for mugs.
The eye test. The eye test is sometimes the best. Okay. But the main crux of this video is about Harry Kane, and a lot of the agenda has changed about, when he left, everyone's like, there's a 30-goal chasm leaving Tottenham. But, we've started the season well. The attacking football's ticking. We're scoring goals. So do you think, and I want to see how you answer this, because I've seen you mention about like a Postecoglou style of striker, like a bulldog sort of, pressing the attackers. And Harry Kane isn't that, but obviously he's world class in other areas. Do you think that Tottenham did the right thing in selling him, in the sense of they can move forward and implement their own style, maybe by then buying in a better replacement for Richarlison in the long term?
So I think that, obviously, at this juncture, 4 games in, everything flowing, it's one where this is a good question to ask, because I think you should get everyone's answer now, and they have to stick with that answer. Because if you say you lose 5 games on the spin, which I don't really see happening, but say that happens, right? Or you don't win for 5 games, that's where everyone's going to go to. Like that's the sort of if you think of like a magnet, it will get just like pulled towards this. Well, if you had Harry Kane, you'd be able to get away with things.
Exactly. Yeah.
For me, I felt I was consistent on this. Is that he had to go. He had to be sold. You had to take the money that you could from him, and I'm all for like selling players. It's okay to sell players. I think people can get in their own way about that sometimes, and I think you've seen that with what's occurred here, because sometimes you need to sort of take that player out to then, allow everyone else to thrive that little bit more. Now, I think Tottenham would have been really exciting with Harry Kane. Would it have been a little bit less cohesive and a little bit more clunky? Because like even in, we're recording this the night after the England-Scotland game, and Kane doesn't work out, or doesn't look like he's working outrageously hard. He does. He's a bit of a mix of everything. He's a bit of a hold-up man. He likes to drop deep. He likes to spray those passes from one side of the pitch to the other. And he would have got in Maddison's way a little bit at times. And he would have not put that pressure and movement on the two centre-backs that you are getting from Heung-Min, Son, and actually Richarlison as well. I know but then obviously the other side of that is the finishing ability that Richarlison has not provided as of yet. I think it was the right thing to sell him. I think you needed to get the money that you could. I think it was just sort of the state of play was that he wasn't going to stay. I mean, I guess the only thing you could say is that with how exciting it feels right now, would he have signed a new contract if you'd got him just to stay this year and see how it is? Maybe. But again, I think sometimes you have to. There's always more players. You're probably seeing it. You could see it with Liverpool this year as well. Caicedo goes for all that money. It feels like a disaster for Liverpool, and then they bring in a couple of other players. And again, as long as you can get everyone working in the right direction, then you can still win games and still be pretty impressive, because there's 11 players on a pitch. So to answer your question, I think it definitely should have sold him. You should have got as much money as you could, which I think you generally have done. And I think Son or Richarlison are much better fits for the team in terms of what Postecoglou wants to do, and to allow someone like Maddison to thrive and to give him the space he needs. And also, I like the addition of Brennan Johnson. I think he'll give you options. I think Solomon has been impressive so far as well. And I think in terms of the overall spine, Van der Ven looks exciting, and Bissouma is a joke, basically. So I think you've replaced a player with a system, haven't you? That's what you've done.
Yeah. I think as well, I like how you mentioned the Maddison thing there, because especially against Burnley, when we signed Maddison, everyone thought he's going to be a 10. He's going to replace Eriksen as that 10 in and around the box. But what he did, which was really effective against Burnley, was he dropped very deep, like right near the centre-backs, and played that sort of quarterback role, I guess you call it now. And then that meant that Bissouma and Sarr sort of then pushed the back line. And it's just, that's probably that versatility where you're like, this guy is so good and so good at ball progression and dribbling and stuff like that, that we can sort of let him have that free role. And it was interesting about what you were saying earlier with some people would call that a luxury player. I don't know what they, it seems like football just goes in they'd be like, oh, that guy, you can't let him do a free roam. Like, you need to trap back. And it's like, it is funny how football works in that way. But finally, obviously a lot of positive chat here about Tottenham, and I love it for one. But predictions now looking towards the end of the season. I did see your predictions, and I saw you put Spurs in fourth, and I had tears in my eyes. I commented that as well. Yeah. But then also, what weaknesses? Because I'm thinking, one over-the-top ball from a quality side, and maybe Van der Ven's pace lets him down in that scenario. Romero gets a bit rash. That's the weaknesses I see. But is there anything that you think that's how they're going to exploit Tottenham? Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that is probably going to be the problem. I think I haven't seen enough of the goalkeeper to be totally convinced by him. Is he? I mean, maybe you can tell me. Is he a sort of an Alisson type? Because obviously you would imagine he might need to sort of sweep out a little bit at times. Is that not something that you've seen as of yet?
Well, I'll be honest, when it started in that first game against Brentford, I was like, oh my God, this guy is nervous, shaky on the ball. But as the fixtures have gone, he's grown into it. His passing range is something we haven't seen at Tottenham for years, and it puts Lloris to shame.
Really?
That sounds really disrespectful. But the only thing I'd say, I mean, he is quite a sweeper. He's brave to come out. You know, with those sort of like bouncing balls when they come in the box and the keeper might leave it for the defender to sweep up. He does come and collect them quite well. The only thing I'd say is his save style is a bit erratic. Okay. There is some times where, I mean, I've seen some compilations as well, but you can't read. He does parry a lot. And he does do these like dramatic, like flailing saves sometimes that people call camera saves. But at the end of the day, he's young, and you know, I think the passing attribute is key, especially the way we want to play, where you sort of like are playing it into Bissouma quite swiftly, and then Bissouma plays it to Pedro Porro, and you've sort of like worked your way out of the press.
Yeah,
we haven't seen that at Tottenham for years. I mean, under Conte, it was very like static, and you had Eric Dyer divvying on the ball, so it was like it's really changed. So that's where I say, but there's still question marks. You know, push comes to shove. Obviously, as we've said, against Liverpool, against Arsenal, those will be the real test when we're like, how can we actually play against a team who's going to actually press us back? Because we've had a lot of the ball, and that's what Postecoglou loves. But what happens when it's more even?
Yeah, and do you know what it's like? I use the sort of analogy a lot of the time of football being similar to boxing, and sometimes like there'll be a guy kind of on the way up, and he's looking really good, but he's not fought someone at a Tyson Fury level, right? And that's that can be the difference. What I would say is, so I could see Tottenham getting pumped by Arsenal. I could see Tottenham getting pumped by Liverpool. I can see Tottenham getting pumped by Man City. I could also see them bloodying their nose, because I think that was the frustration certainly with the North London derby, is that Tottenham didn't even have a go, really. They was just sort of all at sea. And so in terms of dealing with the pace of a game that is electric and has the highest levels of quality players on the pitch, that is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Can they cope with that speed of, and so those are the games that could really hurt them, right? But what I would say is that even if you lose that game, like a Leeds United, right? Remember Leeds under Bielsa? They got pumped once or twice, but I think they then pumped Newcastle the next game, or West Ham the next game, or whatever it was. So even if you lose those games, especially in a season where you're not expecting to get 90 points this year, you want 70-odd points, right? You want to try and get in the Champions League. It's only 3 points. And I think your goal difference is still going to be pretty strong. So I think on a micro scale, look, how good are these centre-backs? Can these centre-backs cope with the best attackers and, the red arrows of Liverpool on the attack, Saka, Odegaard, and how sort of scientifically fantastic Arsenal are? I don't know. I really don't know. But it will only be 3 points you miss out on. And so overall, I think as long as the feeling remains good and strong and there's no European football, there's I think there's a really enjoyable season ahead.
I mean, honestly, when we do lose these games back to back, the mood is going to drop. It's this international break has probably come at the worst and best time because we were on the momentum train. But it's like,
what will happen if you lose a couple of games? The next two, because everyone that's the problem with the international break is that you have time to hype up, and that's essentially what I'm doing right now.
This has been the interesting discussion. I was on the Irish Hotspurs podcast recently, and they were sort of saying like about will the fan base turn, and I'm like, and after listening to Ange on Talksport, I'm like, we've just got to be patient. We've really got to, we've not had a full season of a manager since Pochettino, obviously the year before he was sacked. Like, we've always had, like, Mourinho didn't last a full season, or Conte, or Nuno, whoever, or Mason would come in. So we need to really, like, this season, that's why at the start of the season, I put my estimations as low as 7th, 6th, but we look better and we're playing a more defined attacking style.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll be happy with that.
Totally.
I think that's good enough.
And I've had that with QPR, in the past. We had Mark Warburton, who we dominated most games we played, right? But we didn't, we didn't get promoted or anything like that. But the patience that was always there was so much higher because we're dominating games, we're playing good football. It does matter. Yeah. It massively matters. And I've just quickly gone on theanalyst.com. Here's a stat. Here we go. If you go to theanalyst.com and find, like, there's a thing called zones of control, right? And I can't see last year's, but if you look at it, what you will see is basically like if it's blue, that means that your team is dominating the ball, right? And if it's red, that means the opposition is dominating the ball. Now, if you have a look at everyone's, there's a few teams that are utterly dominating their games of football. Arsenal is one, Brighton are one, Chelsea's one, not surprisingly. Chelsea's one, Man City's one, and Tottenham is one. So last season, that would not have been the case. In terms of your control of the pitch and of the game, it just wasn't there. So I think that's if you lose...
All our metrics have gone through the roof as well. Exactly. Like, I don't know if you on a recent match of the day, they literally compared last season. It's like expected goals are up, shots are up, touches in the opposition. But like that's good enough. Like
I think it is. And I think Spurs fans get that. And I think whatever... Of all the managers that are knocking about, I feel very, very confident that Ange Postecoglou will be the manager of Tottenham for at least the next 2-3 seasons. I really do think you'll sort of settle down with him because I haven't seen a love like this for quite some time.
That felt like a start of a song. I thought you were going to go into there, but anyway, thank you, James. That was a really enjoyable conversation. As I say, you've put a rocket right up me, and I'm now really positive. But as I say, obviously, if you haven't heard of James, I don't know where you've been. You've probably been living under a rock, but his link will be in the description, which seems pointless at this level. But, you know, you have to say those things, don't you? It's part of the YouTube mantra. But no, I really appreciate you coming on, and
pleasure, mate.
I just enjoy having these sort of conversations. I think they're very good, especially from a neutral point of view. I think that's quite enjoyable to hear what outsiders think as well.
Well, no, mate. I enjoyed it. I'm enjoying what Tottenham are doing this year, and I think you should as well, mate. You know, because it can, as we know, it can end like that. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, mate. Thank you for coming on the narrative recently. I appreciate that, mate.
Yeah, cheers.
And anyone who's kind of come here because I might have pushed you this way, make sure you subscribe to Sonny.